All right, thank you so much and good morning. All right, we're here to talk about the future of consumer engagement. So set the baseline. Successful consumer engagement is the way that brands create meaningful connections and authentic connections with their consumers to drive deeper relationships and ultimately getting to consumer preference and loyalty. And I'm really excited today to be joined by two folks who have deep expertise in consumer engagement across media and brands and how we make those authentic connections. I'm going to start with introducing Emma Mondolino, who is the head of Nextdoor Create, the sales and marketing strategy group at Nextdoor. Currently, she's focused on creating value for brand partners by building bespoke creative programs. And before joining the Nextdoor team, Emma worked at Pinterest in both sales and marketing. And prior to her time there, she was a foundational member at the brand strategy team at Twitter. Emma is a native New Yorker, but fun fact, also holds German and Kiwi citizenships and tries to visit those countries as much as possible. Also joining us is Mike Perlman, who leads TVision's global commercial team. As CRO, he's responsible for the company's sales, account management, and customer success functions. Prior to TVision, Mike held senior leadership positions at JumpShot, ComScore, and Millward Brown Digital. He holds a BA in economics from Hamilton College and an MBA from Cornell University. Mike's an avid skier who spends as much time as possible in the mountains. So thank you, Emma and Mike, for joining us. All right, let's get into it. The world's changing. The world has changed. It's been pretty rapid. We had changes as we shifted into time at home, very engaged with our devices and our couches and our living rooms and our home offices. And now we have even more changes. It feels like there's rapid change again going into kind of the behaviorally post-COVID era. So Mike, I want to start with just how consumers are engaging with media in this new world, and how do you see consumers engaging differently with media?
There's a mic on your seat next to you. There we go. All right, have the mic. So we've definitely seen a change in the way that consumers interact with media, and probably the best way to describe it is it's much more fragmented, right? So we're no longer in the days where people are consuming media as a family in front of that TV with 2 or 3 different networks, and the implications to marketers are obvious, right? It's just harder to reach people as they're consuming media differently across a variety of different devices. So, and as far as the pandemic's impact, I think that's just only accelerated the way that we're all tethered to screens, right? We're tethered to screens at work, at home, and tethered to screens for kids through school, and that I think also impacts the way that they're then consuming media.
That's great. And Emma, in this world, how do you see consumers interacting with brands differently? Any changes that feel like you can delineate between kind of pre-COVID and now post-COVID changes?
Sure. I think that even pre-COVID, there was a lot going on with cause marketing, and I think brands were doing a lot more around being affiliated with a cause and saying that they were doing something to support or take action. And I think during COVID, that was tested because I think people had a lot of time to really check in on if brands were really doing that. They became aligned with many more causes, and I think coming out of COVID now, that's still continuing to be checked. And I think that brands have to really do versus just say. So you can't just be a brand that says we're going to donate to a certain cause or we're going to put our brand sponsorship on something. People want to know what you're actually doing, how it's at the core of your business. And so I think that's really stuck. The other thing coming out of COVID now that I've been seeing even in the past week walking around is I think surprise and delight moments are back. I think brands want to be popping up and having moments of joy that they're giving people. We had that really horrible phase where, sorry to anyone that ran one of these commercials, but the commercials were really sad. Like we were just going through and you were watching things and you were being pulled down. And I think now brands are saying, let's kind of pump it back up. And so I think that's been the current trend that I've seen coming out of things, that I think surprise and delight, joy is back with us. So thank you to everyone running those ads.
Thank you. I mean, what you just said too really hit a chord with DoorDash. You may have seen a recent ad campaign, Neighborhood of Good in Every Order. I mean, as we think about how there is a flywheel that exists between a consumer who places an order, a merchant who creates the order and then can build their business with that additional revenue coming in from the order, and then the dasher who uses that income from that delivery to fund their goals. And so it does create this flywheel of empowering a local community. And that's really important. We think about our core mission of economic empowerment, how that local economic empowerment really comes out of that flywheel, and then how we're able to communicate that. So a strong +1 to then how you communicate that across all of your channels. I mean, with any of those TV campaigns or the surprise and delight moments, which I love a pocket of joy. So I always tell the team, what's your pocket of joy? How do you think about measuring, whether it's a causal campaign or a different brand campaign? Like what are the changes that you see happening in measurement or ways to think about measurement maybe now that are different from a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think for measurement, it should all start with what is the goal of the campaign. And I think historically, measurement treated all campaigns the same and maybe had the same KPIs of, if we're talking about TV, was the impression served? And that's not enough, right? We've seen a lot of evolution and growth in terms of the type of measurement that's out there. At TVision, we're a TV measurement company where we have a thesis around engagement. So we're measuring not just whether that impression was served, but were there actually people in the room when that campaign happened, and then were their eyes really engaged with the screen and the content, whether it's the ad or the show, which is what we call attention. And I think it all starts with working with the marketer to understand what are the goals. But at the end of the day, that campaign can really only have an impact if people are truly engaged with it. So I think looking at different forms of measurement to understand consumer engagement, true consumer engagement, meaning attention, and then mapping that to some of the end, KPIs of success that campaign's trying to drive, whether it's brand lift or sales or a variety of different other success measures is what I think leading marketers are doing at this point.
Yeah, I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about how you do measure attention? Like what goes into an attention measurement, and how as a marketer can you communicate that back to your internal teams?
Yeah, so at TVision, our view of attention is, are your eyes actively engaged with looking at the screen? And there's other measurements of attention out there, but I think it's flawed if it's not getting to the point of, is that consumer truly engaged with the content on a second-by-second basis, whether it's the ad or the program? So what we do is we have a panel where there's a technology to really be able to understand through facial recognition, are they engaged with the screen? And we've done studies where we're mapping that attention really does lead to KPIs that marketers care about ultimately. And so I think attention is not, the TV was on or, the content was played. Is somebody there? Because what's happening is oftentimes, and this gets back to kind of what I was talking about earlier around fragmentation, people are distracted now, right? They're looking at their phones, they're getting up, they're leaving the room, they're time shifting content. And so marketers are paying for all these impressions, and oftentimes no one's even there, right? And so for us, it's about really measuring eyes on screen.
Yeah. And I want to shift a little bit and talk about, as you talk to brands every day at Nextdoor Create, what are things that you hear that are priorities for brands in the next 12 months or so?
So this one is a fun one. I was actually just thinking about it as Mike was talking about measurement and starting with the objective. I think one of the things that's been tough is I think our brand partners are having some struggles in actually what their objectives and goals are on some campaigns. I think they're trying to do everything, or they're coming and saying, we have a great idea, help us figure out what we're supposed to measure on it. And that usually changes the idea. So I think that's been just an interesting thing to work through. I do think, given where the current market is, of course, conversions have been top of mind. So I think a lot of the campaigns that we would love to have be branding focused and be really fun, we're being pushed to, okay, but how are we actually driving sales? Which it's also, we're in Q4. We're all trying to drive sales. But I think that has come up more and more and more. And I think we've seen budget cuts to be pushed from branding to conversion. I think on the branding and awareness side of things, what's been interesting is a lot more partnership conversations, even more so than I've seen in the past. So we would love to drive awareness, but we'd love to do it with you. How are some of our values aligned? What are some of our campaigns that are related to each other? We just had a conversation with you guys about this. And so thinking through what are different tactics that we're both bringing to market that we could now have synergies and bring out together. So instead of having individual brand campaigns, more of kind of a cohesive togetherness. And I think that's been a trend before, but I think I'm seeing it significantly more than I had in the past.
Yeah, I wonder a little bit, how when something shifts from being a trend to just being the right way to do business.
Totally.
Because that emotional connection and causal marketing is such a buzzword, but also maybe that's human marketing. And how do you think about connecting with people and creating an emotional moment to build that deeper level of engagement? And then that's the payoff, is the emotional connection. How might you think about measuring or tracking kind of that emotional connection or the emotional payoff over time?
This is why I love getting to sit on the marketing side of things, because you get to say things like the power of storytelling and the impact it has on emotions, and they're super hard to really measure. I do think that there are so many new technologies, platforms, partners to measure. I think TVision, just hearing about the facial recognition, like how cool. I think that there's just unique ways that we need to look at things. We just recently did a campaign with Verizon, and we partnered with kindness.org, who is a great company who basically measures and tells you what kindness is and the impact that it has. And so we did this campaign where we were setting up different neighborhood meetup events and having brands come out and have people come out and all connect. And we were fostering kindness and telling them to do kind acts for each other, to each other. And so we then said, how do you actually see if that works? And so working with kindness.org, they're doing real research around what the impact is and how that is helping people live better, healthier lives. We did some work about 18 months ago, and we discovered that knowing 6 or more of your neighbors significantly decreases the chance of loneliness and depression, which is massive. Now look, knowing 6 of your neighbors is actually a pretty tall order. However, I think that knowing something like that gives you kind of a little bit more of a drive to get to know people, smile at them, mention that you have a real name, you're not just the person that rides in the elevator. And I think that type of measurement, when you think about causal impact campaigns, is what we need to think about a little bit. It won't always drive the bottom line directly. We won't be able to tell you exactly what the ROAS on that is, but I think if you're a brand with purpose, you also need to recognize what that purpose is driving. So we're looking at a few interesting ways to measure.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm curious, Nextdoor is anchored in neighborhoods, and I'm curious how you guys have seen interactions between neighbors and local communities during COVID or post-COVID that something you can talk to your partners about too as you develop new campaigns.
Yeah, look, small businesses are a massive part of our community, and they're a foundational part of it. We also do some research that's not just around kindness. We did survey our members, and 72% said that coming out of the pandemic, they will prioritize shopping at small businesses just as they had started throughout the pandemic. So they're really trying to connect. The small business owners and communities are also generally the neighbors. They live close by, and so we're talking to the same people just about different things, so running your business and also running your home. And then on top of that, I think for larger brands, as they're looking at campaigns trying to connect with both neighbors and businesses, there's an opportunity to do both of those things and reach them in a really human and authentic way, because you're talking to them about their business, but also their life.
Yeah.
It's super interesting because it's a great example of brands that are thinking about success measures that aren't always the same thing, right? It might have, for this particular campaign, I have a success measure of, social impact in some way, and then other campaigns might be about driving towards the bottom line. So I think brands that are thinking that way are the ones that are making the most impact.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Mike, when TVision works with clients, or when you see different campaigns happening, there's so many different things to measure when you launch a large brand campaign. How do you think about distilling into the metrics that truly matter, will help drive consumer behaviors or internal decision making? Like, how do you help partners pull out metrics that matter?
Yeah, so it really does start with a conversation with the brand or the agency or whomever we're working with to really understand what are their goals, right? And once we map towards what those goals are, we're looking at true TV consumption behavior on a second-by-second basis for either them or their competitors, and you can learn a lot from not just being myopic about looking at your own campaign, but looking at what might be driving engagement from some of my competitors or even some leading marketers outside of the industry. And so we work a lot with just trying to provide insights, right, back out in terms of how's the creative resonating, what media placements might be driving the most engagement, what time of day might be driving the most engagement, and just really looking to provide insights back out to our clients.
Yeah. I'm curious who you both think are doing these things very well right now in terms of authentically engaging with their consumers or with large populations, whether it be on TV or online video or activations. Who is driving these authentic experiences? You can say DoorDash too, and that's fine.
First and foremost, DoorDash. There's also, I think, going back to the small business piece, and maybe an obvious answer, but I think they really do a tremendous job, is Amex. I think we've worked with them on a neighborhood favorites program that identifies local businesses that are favorites. They can be small businesses. They can also be your local Starbucks, which may be not a small business, but still a local favorite. I know which one around me has the shortest line and has the mobile order thing figured out, and I go to that one. They're my favorite. When you take a brand like Amex, I think they find campaigns like that, and they don't try to push their brand first and foremost in it. They just want to be a supporting factor. And I think when you look at the Shop Small brand as it's evolved over the years, Amex isn't even really on it. It just has Shop Small badges because they've done such a great job of owning it. But I think that's really where you have a true, authentic brand campaign where people know you're affiliated, but they mean it. They just want to associate and drive forward a mission.
I think it's the brands that are storytellers. So I think the concept of telling stories to drive engagement is still what it's all about. That's what we see within our data. So companies like a Nike that are truly, in these spots telling emotionally driven stories. It's not about pitching product, and they tend to drive the most engagement.
I have a fun one on that, actually. There's a video that's floating around, and I saw it recently, and now I don't know how recent it is, but let's pretend with me and say it's definitely recent. It's the Mercedes, I believe, CEO or CMO that is retiring after years and years. Do I get to tell this and nobody's seen it? Yeah? Cool. You'll take my word for it. So it's this incredible story, to your point, that's built out. It's beautifully done, beautifully produced, and it is him going through, and he's saying goodbye to everybody. He's going through the factory. He is picking up his Mercedes pen. He gets in his Mercedes car. He pulls into his home, kind of gate closes, and the garage opens back up, and he drives out in his BMW, and it says, "Finally free." And it is a great play from BMW in saying, we have the utmost respect. It's basically an ode to him saying, we're so glad that you have had this great career. Thank you for playing with us. Thank you for competing with us. And thank you also for finally confessing that you have a BMW. But it is just such a great storytelling campaign that didn't push a new model, didn't push whatever they were doing right now. It was just a story and proving that they're a brand that can have fun. And I think those moments, I looked around and saw a couple of cute outbursts and smiles there. That's what a brand does. And maybe we can measure if people are smiling as they're seeing those videos and have real recognition of it.
There are companies that do that. We don't do that, but yeah, emotional tracking is another way to look at it.
I haven't seen it yet, so I'm going to go and Google that immediately because I love that. How do you think about engaging a consumer across a journey? I feel like we've mentioned specific campaigns or channels, but really one consumer engagement of incredible interaction is not enough. It's a lifetime, and it's a journey, and it's a full customer experience. How do you work with brands, or how would you think about creating that meaningful journey from introduction to a brand and then guiding your partners or internal teams to make sure customers stay engaged throughout their life cycle?
I think it starts with discovery. I think discovery is a huge, huge part of it. And I think that the ways that can now happen is really interesting. There are a ton of social platforms out there. There's a ton of different media outlets. We look a lot at recommendations and how impactful those are. So we believe that if you see a recommendation from your neighbor that's very trustworthy, you inevitably have a lot in common with these people. Even if you don't know them, you see the same things when you walk out of your home every day. You're passing by the same people, the same businesses. So getting recommendations and discovering a brand, a business, a service that way, I think is the initial part of the journey. I think seeing it authentically from a real person is huge, but I also think that how you show up in the discovery phase the first time you see an ad is huge. I also think that the programs that are out there right now at the start of a journey are really important. I have sent around many DoorDash $5 off your first order to friends to get my $5 back. So I think that programs like that, though, really do pull folks in, and then you stick with it as you get to learn and know more about that brand. I think that's then where the storytelling comes in, because now you've discovered, you've trialed a brand. Sure, if you love it off the bat, you're a loyalist, but otherwise, how else are you keeping someone engaged? And I think that's where having great storytelling-based campaigns really comes in, so people want to grow with your brand and see what else you're doing.
I guess one thing to add, I completely agree. And one thing to add to that is I think the journey is not linear, and marketers can't think of it as a linear journey that's common for every single consumer, right? There's a lot of variance in how people interact with brands and how they ultimately navigate their own kind of decision journey. From a marketer's perspective, there is a lot of underlying data that they can gain access to, especially now with different, the emergence of CTV and just additional data that's underneath the way people are engaging with media, that the marketers that are really sophisticated and smart are linking this data to just develop more learnings around how people are engaging with their content and what ultimately is resonating. But it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of linear journey.
Yeah, that data is so important. I mean, something that we think a lot about at DoorDash is take the quant data, for sure, from all of the sources that you can, distill that into actions, but also listen to your customers with the qualitative, because how you build and think about a customer journey, and I'll say for us, that's consumers, but that's also dashers and merchants, and what do they need? What do they need today? How can we help? And how do we bake that into some sort of offering within an experience and engaging them either with a product or an offering or a solution? But it's the two-way engagement too that we want to make sure we don't lose, so we can build those authentic relationships and go into the authentic storytelling. Because I think if you don't understand the needs, then you can't tell the stories that kind of wrap around those needs and, again, create that intrinsically human connection.
I think there's also one thing on that when you say the entire journey, when you actually get to point of sale, I think also helping customers now in what they should be doing. So you can buy almost everything online, and what you can't buy online, you can order online and have brought to you. But I think there are still something about point of sale and walking into a store or actually going somewhere. And I think also having brands help people understand what they should do. Like, I know there's been a ton with the gig economy when I think about Dashers, for example, too, but there are times where it's raining and maybe there's not as many folks out and encouraging people to go and pick up their orders, for example. I think there is benefits to brands in helping their own bottom line and putting out actual real-time ad campaigns of driving to point of sale and where you want people to be doing things, while also actually helping consumers. That's useful to know that something might take way longer, or there's an experience in store, or just thinking about where the actual point of sale will happen and incorporating that into also the advertising journey.
All right. We are in Q4. I assume many of us are in 2023 planning mode. I know I am deep. I'm sure we're all deep. In terms of thinking about what's next in building authentic customer relationships and customer engagement, what should we be thinking about as marketers in our roadmaps?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it all starts with learning, right? So it's understanding what's driving the behavior of your customers and what your story is to them, what your value proposition is to them, where you kind of play a role, and then understanding how to deliver upon that. And so I think that gets down to studying, gathering data and studying how they're currently interacting with you as a brand, how they're interacting with your media, potentially how they're interacting with some of your competitor products or media, and then from all that learning, ultimately informing your strategic planning. I think what often happens too much is kind of the inertia of, this is what we did in the past, so we're going to plan to do the same in the future, without enough studying of what's changing and what's really happening.
I think learning is a better word than I was going to kick off with, which was survival is the first one that comes to mind. So I think learning is a better one. I think the other thing for most of us at this stage, especially on the platform side, is we're relying on product. So getting the product roadmap together has been huge. I think we are growing quickly and forever trying to create a better product experience. And so I think as we get there, then sorting out what does that mean and where do we drive marketing, which brands can we pull in. We're super excited to continue building on something called our Discover base, which also includes a map. So also a quick shout out, Halloween is coming. For anyone that has not checked out our treat map, go mark your home if you're handing out treats or dog treats this year. But I think things like that, saying what are the big products that are coming up and then figuring out what our campaigns are where we can reach out to brand partners and say, this is really the next big thing that we're doing. So getting that sorted on the roadmap is first and foremost for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Really enjoyed the takeaways around storytelling, authenticity, listening to your consumers, understanding the data, looking at all of the pieces and having clear goals with that. Great best practices and things we can all think about as we build our next plans for 2023. But thank you so much, Emma and Mike, and thank you all for your time.